Well, greetings. Today we're going to talk about some basic principles of innovation, and then we're going to get into schools of thought around innovation. So the two things we're going to try to accomplish today is sort of to set the target for an innovative effort. What are we trying to discover? And number two, to take a look at different theories or different approaches to innovation that we've seen over the years. So to get us started, let's start to look at what we're looking for in innovation, what we're trying to achieve, and all the material that you see in this and other lectures that we do online and in class will be from the Idea Chase, 7 Principles for Breakthrough Innovation. So let's go in and take a look, first of all, at the object of a innovation chase or an idea chase. One of the things that's interesting about ideas, they're like stars. If you take a look at the nighttime sky, you can see lots of stars up there. It's really, really quite nice and wonderful to see, but they don't have any real organization and real structure. That is typically what ideas are like. If you're really trying to find a breakthrough idea, an idea that's really meaningful, what you look for are connections among the stars. So a breakthrough idea is an idea of ideas. It's a collection of ideas that come together to form some opportunity, some space that was not available before. Hopefully we're the first ones to see it, and even better if our competitors do not see that. So that's the difference between an idea, something that's up in the sky, and the breakthrough idea. You'll see a collection of things come together. Now, let me give you an example of this. One of the projects that I've worked on firsthand years ago was the Apple iPod. And of course, this was the first creation of a music player, something that could hold a huge library of songs and be very, very mobile, and yet deliver music in a format and a sound that was good. It was solid. And if you think about iPod, it was an idea of ideas. The first idea was digital music, the transition of music from vinyl or from other formats, tape, whatever it might have been, into digital. That happened very, very quickly and was driven primarily by the recording industry. It was certainly much more efficient to record music in digital form. You could go in and correct it. If an artist had a bad day and was singing slightly out of key, then it was possible for the recording engineers to use digital technology to sharpen up that sound and make the note go to pitch. And that's still done today in a lot of voice processing technology and a lot of instrument technology. If something is slightly off pitch, then that can be corrected just automatically. And of course, you add artificial intelligence to that. Not only can you correct it, you can add to it. You can generate it. So again, generative AI is changing that these days. Compact memory, smaller memory devices with more memory. The PC revolution seems kind of strange to talk about that today, but when iPod becomes part of the marketplace, that was a star that appeared into the sky, that people did have computers at home. They had them everywhere. The internet allows us to connect all those things. I think the biggest star in the sky was e-commerce. There was a way to charge that was easy for the customer, and it was also acceptable to the music industry. And I think that was something that you really had to think about, that a way to monetize this idea of ideas. And of course, you could do all that faster. So the point I want to make here is that when you're a leader in an organization and the task is innovation, too many times we don't think big enough about the innovation ahead of us, or the frontier that's opening up ahead of us. It's usually a combination of ideas. Now, one of the ways to start to apply this is, with the 7 technologies. One of the things that I've mentioned throughout the class is that it's not one technology or a single technology that's really driving a lot of innovation. It's combinations. Again, idea of ideas is the key piece to remember there. And so if you think about that, let's jump into some theories around this. Some people that have come before and thought about innovation and sort of how they cast it. The one thing that you'll find in innovation or any innovation research is that writers and practitioners, people in the field, they will draw this dichotomy of inspiration or discipline. And notice that, it's carefully worded there, inspiration or discipline. What it means is that if innovation is truly inspiration, it is for the most talented. It is for the people that are creative. They sort of have the knack, so to speak. And so it's very inspirational. It also means that you can't manage it. It just happens. We're lucky when it happens, but it's not something that we can manage or measure. And that is the way that it is cast mostly, I think, in Harvard Business Review and different books, on the topic, because it's a really, if you think about it, a very appealing form of innovation, that it's, these amazing people, and it excuses us from being innovative. We no longer have to think about being innovative. It's just for those incredible people out there. Well, there's another school of thought, and this one's not as popular, and it's easy to see why. It's the discipline school. It means that innovation's a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of data collection. And so organizations and leaders need to sort of set the tempo for more disciplined types of innovation, more research driven, and certainly not easy. Let's just say that the discipline school sort of says, well, ideas hide and we have to take a lot of effort to find them. So what you'll see is innovation cast as one or the other, which builds a false dichotomy, if you think about that, or what I like to think of false contradiction. Well, if you're inspirational, you can't be disciplined. And if you're disciplined, you can't be inspirational. And it's not true. I'm going to take you through some schools of thought here. And what I hope you see at the end is that good innovation is a combination of both, although in theory and certainly in writing, it is cast as a false contradiction. If you're inspirational, you can't be disciplined, and if you're disciplined, you can't be inspirational. It's just not true. I certainly haven't seen it in the organizations that I've researched, nor the organizations where I've had firsthand access and experience in an innovation endeavor. So let's take a look at how this has been cast. So again, if we sort of move these two thoughts, or these two schools, across a continuum, you have the inspiration piece. And so that's intuition, creativity, artistry. You can see that on your left, and discipline, grit, methods, and muscle on the right. And what you really start to see are schools of thought that are placed along the continuum, and they certainly gain in popularity, then lose their popularity. They work for certain situations and don't work for situations. So when I was writing the book, one of the things that I wanted to do was to not knock any one of these schools and say, well, it's bad, because they all had something good to offer. But I also did not want to take with me some of the disadvantages of each school, because what you're trying to do as a leader, and what I was trying to do as an author of this book, is to show that the best innovative efforts are a symbiotic combination of inspiration and discipline. You want them both, whereas it's been cast as you can't have them both. Certainly the best organizations have them, but let's dive into each school and see sort of the pluses and the minuses of each school. I think the most famous school was the mosh pit. The mosh pit's a fun one. I love it. It's absolutely great. You can sort of tag the timeline of this school along the early 2000s, late 1990s. Really, you can actually track it along with the popularity of the band Nirvana, if you really want to think about mosh pit. basically what the mosh pit says is that you can't control innovation. It is a very inexact and non-definable activity that occurs when a bunch of very creative people get together. So what we want to do is create conditions for those people to come up with those ideas, to have that innovative surge out there. And it was really called the mosh pit. And mosh pits are fun, as you can see here in this diagram. The pros of the school is that it promoted playfulness, and that was a good thing. The idea that innovation needed to be playful, it needed to have a context where people were felt more free to contribute to ideas. And I think the big one it gave us was community and collaboration. Basically, what the mosh pit said is that one leader, one person is unlikely to come up with the great idea. It's really a combination of people. And I think this was sort of the school I grew up in, to be quite honest with you, where you had sort of taken innovation and placed it into the hands of a community of people. You try to unbound them. You create spaces where there are pinball machines and foosball tables and ping pong tables and nap cubes and things like this. And you sort of say, okay, let's just let the innovation happen. And I think it works to some degree. The problem with it was scalability. I think that it was really good for designing gadgets, let's just put it that way, or, certainly, small things. But if you tried to scale that out to designing a bridge or designing a neighborhood or trying to design a, reclaim some polluted real estate or something like that, that the scalability was hard. The mosh pit didn't work well, and it also lacked efficiency. Sometimes the mosh pit could go on forever, and it was difficult as a leader to kind of rein that in. So what we want to do with the mosh pit is take with us the idea of playfulness, take with us the idea of community, but let's leave behind the cons of it, the scalability and the lack of efficiency. It's a fun school, I have to admit. Again, for me personally, this was one that certainly when I was where you are now in MBA classes or undergraduate classes, this was the emerging school. This was the one that was replacing sort of that sole, thoughtful leader that would come up with the idea. It was a mosh pit. So it's fun, it's good, it has pros, and it has cons. Well, the next one that I want to talk about, and I think this is a fun one too, is the rock star. Now, basically what the rock star school says is that in order for an organization to be innovative, you've got to have someone at the top that is innovative, that is thinking differently about the marketplace, and that can lead the organization to that new and promising frontier. You need the rock star. It was really built on a lot of, I think, I would say late 80s, 90s type of thinking about these magnificent leaders, leaders that would write these great books on leadership, and you would say, okay, that is the way to go. Steve Jobs from Apple Computer certainly personified the idea of the rock star out there, and there were others. I'd say back in, years ago in MBA programs, there was a guy named Lee Iacocca that managed Chrysler, and he had pulled it out of bankruptcy, and he wrote a book, and suddenly that was the way to go. Jeff Immelt, a lot of these great leaders, and the idea was, you find this great leader, then the organization's going to survive. They're going to be innovative, and so it was kind of called the rock star school. I liked it. It was fun. The pros of it were leadership and visibility. I think the leadership thing was really big. That was huge. That innovation could not be done effectively without some leadership. There had to be somebody that was driving the car, or someone that was driving the effort, and also the visibility of it, that if your chief executive officer or the leader of the company was innovative, then it certainly gave you more visibility about innovative efforts out there. And so it was really good for that. But there were also some mistakes, made about that school. If you worked in a company that had a rock star like that, and I certainly did, you realize that the rock star wasn't the one coming up with the ideas so much. They were just providing the leadership, which, gives you that pro there of leadership. But some I think novels or some books on innovation kind of gave too much credit to the rock star. So that leads us to the cons. It was risky, if the rock star leaves or if the rock star stops being right, then it's really, really tough. And I think the biggest con of it was it made innovation non-inclusive. We just let the rock star come up with the ideas and then we all follow. So it was a very appealing school. It's for those of you, international students, it's a very American type of story. Americans love this type of story, that there's some messiah out there. And that's because I think that, as a society, we're more individualistic out there. But I think the reality was it was more of a collective effort, but the rock star got the credit for it. So culturally, it was kind of an interesting phenomena to see, this very American model of a decisive leader that just had all the answers coming out there and, creating all this innovation, when in reality, it might have not quite been the complete story. So it's a very interesting school to think about. The next one that's really, really fun, and I love this one, fast following. I've seen this, many, many times. And so here's how the story goes in fast following. Why take the risk? Why be the leader when we can identify who the leader is? We will improve on their innovation, use our resources to do so, and then suddenly we're in first place. After all, nobody remembers who finishes second. They remember who finishes first. So that was the fast following school. Very, very popular among organizations with a lot of history, with a disposition towards not being innovative, because now the burden was off of you. What you could do is leap the leader, so to speak. So that was one of the pros of it. I think another thing that it gave us, which I thought was really interesting, was boundary spanning. What you did in the fast following school is you looked beyond your company and looked into the marketplace to try to see who was leading, where the data was, saying the next opportunity was, and where the venture capital money was going. So it really sort of opened up this idea, again, more on the discipline side, that we start collecting data about the marketplace to try to see who that innovator is, the person or the organization that we're going to try to leap. But in that process, there were some major disadvantages. I think the cons of it were keeping up. You had to move fast. If someone got out there ahead of you, then you certainly had to be quick to understand that change, and you had to work fast. You had to make quick decisions. So it didn't forgive you of making decisions. It actually kind of put more burden on you, where if that innovator shows up out there on the radar screen, you've got to keep up. And I think the biggest one is missing the signal. Who is the innovator? Who is the person that we try to jump out there? And that was not always clear. I think that was the toughest part of fast following. Now, interestingly enough, this became, I think, one of the favored schools of the Harvard Business Review, and they had several articles on fast following. It became very, very popular, and the executives that read it loved it because, again, it took a little bit of the burden off of them. They just say, "Hey, we've just got to find that person out there, that company out there." But many times, that innovator grew too big and too powerful, and the followers could not leap them. They couldn't even get close to them. A good example of that was Google and IBM. I mean, IBM is looking out there, and IBM is a classic fast follower. IBM's looking out there. They see Google come on the scene, and they say, well, it's just a simple search engine. They didn't realize that Google was actually becoming a brand new form of operating system. And it was basically the operating system of the internet. And so IBM missed it. They absolutely could not read the signal, or they misread the signal and sort of put Google in a box and said, well, they can do this, but they can't do that. And again, when that starts happening, you miss the opportunity. So fast following was trickier than it seemed. Now, that said, even some innovative firms fast follow. I would say that Apple was not the first organization or the first company out there with a music player. There were other music players out there. A company called Rio had music players out there, and Intel actually had a very nice, 30-song MP3 player out there that was very portable. I think that was really different about Apple was, again, they fast followed and proved that, said you could have 10,000 songs versus 30 songs. And they were able at the time to sort of leap that early leader, but they moved fast. It was almost difficult to say whether they were fast following or whether they were the innovator. They moved so fast. Microsoft does this. I mean, so it's kind of interesting. Fast following may not be bad per se, but you don't want it to be the entire portfolio of your innovative endeavors. So what we could think about with fast following is that it may be a good accompaniment to other innovative schools out there, but we don't want to rely on it solely because, again, we're outsourcing our innovation to the marketplace. The marketplace innovates, and we try to jump the leader. But I think it's really interesting. It's a fun school to think about, and it's not a bad choice sometimes in a marketplace that's uncertain. But that's fast following. Disruption is one that was just absolutely fantastic. Now we're moving again more towards that discipline side of innovation. And basically what disruption said is that changes in the marketplace can be determined by collecting the right data. So what it really kind of said is that signals in the marketplace aren't as uncertain as we think they are. They're actually well signaled in data. Any company should be able to see that. If you're able to see it in the data, then you start to move to the new opportunity. And so the pros of disruption, it was data and metrics. And if you think about disruption, this is the idea of technological disruption, or disruptive technology, disruptive innovation. This whole idea, it was one of those things. And forecasting is, again, saying, look, you can tell that through data and metrics when the marketplace has shifted. And basically those metrics, those analytics would be customer centric, that customers were demanding new things. Customers wanted new things. A good example of this was, in the beverage business, when people started shifting away from fruit juices, sugary drinks to water. And the performance metric was no longer sort of refreshment by sugar or Coca-Cola or things like that, that you wanted hydration. There was a fitness sort of theme involved in this, and the market had shifted. What disruption would say is that would be seen in the data. And so a company that would want to pursue that new opportunity, or that should shift to that new opportunity, should see that disruption and should move quickly. Now, what they also said in the disruptive school, which was interesting, is that established companies can't see that as quickly as new companies. And so what they really said about this was that a brand new company, someone new to the marketplace, was quite likely to be the one that would bring that metric to bear. So a company like Aquafina or Avion, the water producers, they would be the ones that would say, hey, we see the change in the marketplace. We've got a beverage that meets that new need. They're going to see that before a traditional soft drink maker. And that might be true. I'm not going to argue that. I think that's true sometimes, but I think that basically the data is visible to all. I don't think that, and I think that's what the research said, is that, well, other companies saw that. I've done a piece of research that's really interesting, and looking at companies that did not recognize a disruption, And I thought that when I interviewed some of these executives, they would just say, hey, I missed it. It was too mysterious. The data was too, murky for me to see out there. But no, they all said, no, we knew it was coming. No one was surprised. They just couldn't move the company fast enough. So disruption really kind of flipped us over to discipline and saying, look, we need to be data collectors. We need to certainly think about customers through analytics and try to understand their behavior. So, consumer behavior types of disciplines and marketing courses, started becoming, very, very rich in content here. And when we understand that, we need to move the company fast. So forecasting, data, and metrics were the pros. The cons were the generalizability. It was sometimes hard to know if you had a bona fide new trend in the marketplace, or was it just a fad? And I think that what was really interesting about the generalizability con is that one disruption was not necessarily a good indicator of the next disruption, even if it was in the same industry. You might have a marketing disruption. A company comes in and tries to market a different way, and that disruption would measure and look differently than a product disruption or an organizational disruptions. So what was really funny about it is that disruptions would appear in different ways in data. There was no generalizability to it. So it was very difficult for that. But let's take the pros with us. We'll, the data and the metrics and the forecasting, and we'll try to leave behind the idea that it was tough to generalize sometimes, and that it was sometimes difficult to discern a fad from reality. And that leads us to the most disciplined piece of innovation. And I think the one that does not get the headlines, it is one that is not fun. It is one that is probably most difficult to read about. But if you really start to look at some of the best books out today, they really talk about this. And it's the grit approach, that basically innovation's hard work. And I would have to say that in writing the book, I was amazed in how much grit there is in artists that I thought were just naturally talented. And I'll give you an example of that. In talking to some members of the band of the artist Prince and his road manager, I was amazed at how hard he worked. And that was the first thing they talked about, is they said, well, one of the things that you had to get used to if you worked with Prince was his work ethic. He worked very, very hard. It was hard to keep up with him. He suffered many physical ailments because he worked so hard. He rehearsed so hard. He was never satisfied. If you look at Mozart, if you look at Beethoven, if you look at the innovative efforts of Martin Luther King, almost anybody, you realize that there was a lot of hard work. It was very methodical. It involved a lot of people. It was not easy. It was something where you just had someone with a very rigorous work ethic, someone with a very determined soul that decided either individually or collectively with others, or as part of an organization, we're going to tackle this hard problem. And that kind of leads you to the cons. It wasn't an inspirational brand of innovation. So, no surprise that books, for the most part, have not talked about it. But now I would say that's changing. Some of the books that I'm reading, and certainly the one that I wrote myself, to the two that I've written myself, and the articles I've written about it, sort of tell this story of grit, that it's disciplined. It takes a lot of work. And I think another con of it, and I would accept this, sometimes it took too long. You could get into this state of analysis paralysis and never really get anything done. And that was one that, fair enough that might be a criticism of it. So again, we will take the hard work, we'll take the methods with us, and we'll try to leave behind the fact that it's non-inspirational and that it might take too long. So again, it's really sort of fun to think about these different schools out there. Well, one of the things that I write about in the book, and one of the things that I really want you to kind of understand, is that if you look at today's world, and one of the things I write about in the book is the idea here that innovation post-pandemic is quite different, and it is. And I can tell you why. It's because the problems that organizations are trying to solve these days are quite a bit more difficult than the ones they tried to solve before the pandemic. Things are more complex now, and I don't think that is a threat to anyone, to me or to you. But what it does, it gives us an opportunity to try to stretch that innovative effort a little bit more, to try to think a little bit differently. And again, it's kind of in the book, I said it's time to make innovation innovative again. And I think that that's what I tried to do in writing the book, trying to look at everybody from Banksy to Mariah Carey to Genentech, Boston Scientific, these companies and projects that were doing amazing things. How do they do it? Well, it's a symbiotic. And again, when we say symbiotic, I'm borrowing from the life sciences here, but I love the word. It's mutually benefiting combination of inspiration and grit. So what you're really trying to do as a leader is combine two things that have really been written about and portrayed as being polar opposites and mutually exclusive. They're actually quite good together. So it's almost like a Reese's peanut butter cup, peanut butter and chocolate. It works well together. So the leadership challenge is to create opportunity in space and to try to get that innovative idea out there. So the thing that I want you to remember from innovation schools of thoughts is that they're typically cast across the continuum of inspiration and discipline. And in doing that, what you get sometimes is a little bit of a false contradiction. If you're inspirational, you can't be disciplined. If you're disciplined, you can't be inspirational. I want you to put that behind you. I want you to think differently about that. They can be together, they should be together, and they should reinforce each other. And with that, you have the innovation schools of thought.